Okay, so today's session, we're going to be looking at contacts, maps, and dashboards. So just as before, if you have any questions as we're going through, please just drop them in the chat. And then Danny will pose them to me. We'll answer them together. If you, in terms of the materials that you'll see today, you will have these as well as a recording of the session, along with some other learning materials in a platform, which you'll be invited to at the end, that will have the entire series. There's been a bit of a reshuffling for this one, so we initially had this planned as lesson 7. This has now been pushed forward. So yeah, let's start and go through what our learning objectives are. So contacts, maps, and dashboards. First, we'll be discovering what they are in Zeit and where to find them. We'll also understand how best to use contacts. And two of the important parts there are contact type and contact status, which mirrors to some level site type and site status. We'll learn some best practices involved in how to use contacts, and one of the ways is for service mapping, and how to create filters and visualizations in your project that relates to the maps feature, and how to create iframes and embed dashboards into your report. So that relates to the dashboard part of the session. Okay, so let's get going with contacts and beneficiaries. So contact information forms an integral part of coordination and general operation. So we can think of contacts in Zeit and in CCCM in general as whoever is essentially connected in some level to a site or multiple sites. So for that reason, they serve the basis of service maps, or essentially directories of service providers working in sites. But they don't only have that function. A service provider might be one type of contact in a site, but you might also have many different types of contacts in a site. And so Zeit Manager has a specific feature for managing different types of contacts. So let's now have a look at some of these types of contacts that you might have come across yourself. So you'll all have had service providers as people working in the sites. Other examples of contacts at the site level might be government officials. It could be site staff. It could be focal points. It could also be signatories for specific information at the site, or it could be emergency responders, let's say fire emergency staff or first aid staff. You might want to categorize them within your sites in Zeit as contacts. Beneficiaries essentially work in the same way as contacts, but for beneficiaries, examples being cash for work roster or training participants. So the obvious difference there being those people that participate in activities or support provided. So an obvious question to start off with is, why would we not use an ODK form or a COBOL form to collect data on contacts? So we had some problems historically using ODK forms to collect contact information. And one of those is the rate at which contacts update and change. So contacts will change frequently, right? You might have a service provider that will work for 6 months, and you know they'll work for 6 months, but they won't be covering that site in the future. And so all of the information tagged to that contact will change. COBOL forms often have difficulty in overwriting previous information and essentially to be displayed clearly on the platform. So that brings us on to the next point, actually, accessibility. So you want to be able to go into your project and look at contact data really easily and quickly. You don't really want to have to go through different forms and say, okay, maybe it's this form, and then look into that form to see who provides wash assistance in the site. So you want to have it very clear and visible in the site, and that's what the contacts feature allows, essentially. So contacts have a life cycle themselves, and life cycles are much easier as distinct features in Zeit than they are in COBOL forms. In a COBOL form, you can submit a form, but you can't really flag it in such a clear way to show that this service provider is active right now, but in 8 months, they will be inactive in the site. And then in terms of multiple fields and being able to visually show those multiple fields, that can be much better done through the contacts feature on site. So some of the features with contacts and beneficiaries, so they are viewable and you can add them via the mobile or the web application. They have very flexible permission structure. It can be really easy to change and edit who sees those contacts. That can be really important for privacy reasons over some site contacts. So very easy to say based on the users that you have in your project and the roles that they have, if they can see contacts and if they can edit and create contacts. You can also bulk import and edit contacts. So let's say you want to add contacts into your project right now, and you have an Excel list of 350 contacts that overlap between different sites. It's very easy to just put those all in one go. They're exportable through reports and data sets, just like any other data that you might use. And they're also linked to sites. That means that one person might and probably will, in most cases, appear twice in a contact directory. So you can think about that in terms of, let's take the example of service providers. You'll likely have service providers providing that service, not just for one site, but for, let's say, an entire region for a given time period. And so that person will come up multiple times across all of those sites. Okay, so there are 3 tabs when we will look at the Zeit platform as well to see how this looks in practice. But when we look at contacts, we have 3 tabs. The first is the contact list view. This essentially determines the contact fields that you can see within the site dashboard contact tab. The contact information, you choose the settings you choose and set the fields for contacts and the behavior, and permissions grants access for who has access to view and to edit and change which parts. Okay, so first we're going to have a look at the contact list view. That's the first of the 3 tabs in the contact section. So if you want to turn on and use contacts in your project, which is a recommended feature, it's a very useful feature. The first thing that you'll do is you'll go into that tab and you'll turn on the contacts. If at any point you turn that contact feature off, important to know that it doesn't delete the underlying data, it just hides the feature. So if you ever toggle it back on, you'll retrieve that previous information. The order fields, you can also determine the order that the contact information will appear when you look at it on your site dashboard. And in this contact list view, the final thing that you can do is you select 6 summary fields to appear in the contact view on the site dashboard. So 3 of those are mandatory. That's identifier, name, and contact type. And the rest of those are optional, and you can select which are best for you to view. So now we'll just do a demo. We'll turn on the contacts, and then we'll view and select some summary fields, just to show you how that would look. So as always, we'll go into our project, and then we'll go into project settings. We'll go down here to where you see site contacts. So the 3 tabs, as discussed before, are contact list view, contact information, and permissions. So the first one is contact list view. So over here, we'll see that the site contact is not active, and you'll toggle that on. So once the contact list is updated, you'll see all of the different fields, data fields, that can be given to contacts. So the 3 which mentioned before are mandatory, are the identifier that's automatically given, the name, and the contact type. So then we can look at some of the other ones which we think will be important. So let's say that we want to include the gender. We want to include organization, and we want to include the WhatsApp. Okay, so now we have 6. If we try and select another one, it'll say that you can't select more than 6 fields. It's important to note at this stage that that doesn't mean that you can't input more information. It just means that you can't view these more than these 6 tabs on the site contact list. So we'll come to that in a second. This essentially shows what can be easily seen on the Zeit platform, not all the data that's collected. Okay, so some of the functionalities of these different contact fields. Required fields can designate which fields are required, and you can toggle those on and off. So you can say that when someone inputs a contact, they are required to input the email. The status is an important feature as well. So this is similar to sites, better to mark contacts as inactive instead of removing them completely. So you have the statuses of active, inactive, flagged potentially, and you can also add new statuses. And if a service provider stops providing services, they can better be marked as inactive than just being deleted. Status automations is a very useful feature. So this essentially will automate the status to change after a specific amount of time or given date. So essentially that would work quite well if, let's say, you have WASH service providers working in a region, and you know they'll only be working until May 2026. So you can put that date in the status automation, and then once you reach May 2026, the status will automatically change to inactive. The contact type will allow you to set which fields appear for which contact type. So the contact type might be something like, let's say, service provider and site management. So let's say those are 2 contact types that you have in your project. The importance of contact type is that you might have some fields which only relate to service providers and don't relate to site management staff. So let's say date valid until is something which makes sense for service providers because they have an expiry date, but it doesn't make sense for site management. So that way you can ensure that, sorry, excuse me. That way you can ensure that when someone puts in the details of a site management staff, they won't have to put in the date valid until, whereas it will be mandatory for service providers. So let's just have a look at that right now. We'll explore some of the contact fields, and we'll adjust the field by the contact type. Okay, so I'm back in my contact list. Here I have the contact information. These are essentially all of the different data fields that we'll be collecting information about. So you can see we have the name and the identifier, which is mandatory. And then we have all of this other information that we already saw in contact list view. We can go in and we'll look at contact type, for example. So over here, I've already set that we have the 2 contact types of service provider and site management. And you can add a contact type quite easily just by selecting in here. So then as we go further down the list, we'll see we have some of the basic information, phone, status. We can have a look at status. This is also color coded, active, flagged, and inactive. And you can add a status yourself, and you can also assign it a different color. Then this is the part which I mentioned before. So status valid until. So that can be turned on and off. Email, gender, organization, position, WhatsApp, address, notes, and photo. So these are all of the pre-assigned fields that you can toggle on and off. So you could just toggle this off, for example, because it's not relevant for your project. These parts are essentially metadata. They're highlighted with an asterisk, but they're automatically created. And so this part is the custom fields. And we'll come back to custom fields in a second, because those can be quite important for your projects. But let's say, for example, we have organization. We want to add some organizations in, but we have two separate contact types in our project. We have site management and we have service providers. Now, site management, let's say in this instance, has the is always the same organization, so we don't need to include that in our questions in the contact information for site management, but we do need to include it for service provider. So we would click on this, and you can see over here that we have show this field for contact type. So if I only wanted to make this relevant for service providers, I deselect and I just put service provider. Okay, and then I put make this field required if that's relevant, and I'll add some organizations for that. So let's say we have a number of service providers. And this way, whenever anyone would create a contact type of type service provider, they would be given these options and they'd have to select one of these options. And then, so we might save changes here. And now we can also see that organization is shown as a mandatory field. Okay, so this is just an overview again of the information fields that exist. And also just shows that these have very specific types, whereas the custom part can be any type which you choose it to be. Contact status, as discussed, can be customized. What the template terms mean is that active is currently valid, flag needs review, that's an important feature to use, and inactive is no longer active. So some of the importance of the status and flagging is shown here. So contact lists really often do go out of date, so people forget to update those. So this can be helped by reminding users to update contacts that are marked as flagged. So it can be useful to automate that flagging process. So you know that this contact provider, this service provider, let's say, will be valid and relevant for 6 months, but you're not entirely sure what will happen after. You might get a project extension. So you would just select that as automate to that date and flag it potentially. So when it's flagged, it's really useful to recognize that as a sign to go in and check what the process is. Maybe it should be turned to inactive, or maybe it should be returned to active. Okay, so custom field types. We went through all of the different field types and we left custom. So a custom field can be single select, can be multi-select, can be text, integer, date, or a cascade. So I think all of those would make sense. Single select, multi-select, text, integer, date. This selects also optionally allow users to add choice options. So this can help with managing choices. Let's say you have a lot of choices that you know exist, and some of your field team will know better. So you would allow them to create those options as they're in the field. Cascade allows you to create a choice filter or a two-step question. So an example of that might be cluster and activities, right? So you might select one specific cluster and then add after that a list of activities in the next field. So let's actually just have a look at that for a moment. So in this demonstration, we'll be creating a custom field on a cascade option. So we're back into the contact information, and this time we'll go down and look at the custom fields. So let's say we add a custom field. That custom field might be, let's call it cluster 2. And here we have a drop down of the types. So here, instead of all these other options, we're going to select cascade. So let's say that this again will only be relevant for service providers. This will be required, and we will add an option. And the first option will be shelter, let's say, and the second option will be protection. And this, if we continue adding options here, will be at the first level. So let's say we want to add a sub-level. We will add a sub-level over here, and this one will be an activity, essentially. So we'll name the sub-level activity, and the sub-option might be something like counseling services, and that would go under protection. We might create another one, which would be latrine repairs, and this will go under shelter. Okay, so we would potentially add multiple selection, and we press save. So now we have a custom field, which will show up every time you create a new contact, which will also show which cluster does the service provider belong to, and which activities does that service provider conduct. Okay, so the third tab is permissions. This is quite simple to understand. It's a very easy, user-friendly way of granting different permissions to different user types. So the permission types that you can have over contacts is either to view the contacts or to create and edit contacts. The user levels match the user roles in Zeit. If you remember from our previous session, the user roles in Zeit are things like viewer, editor, manager, and some other roles as well. So essentially, you can look at all of those very specific roles, and even within the focal areas of those roles, and you can say viewers will have access to, will have no access to view or create edit, and you can say that editors within this project have access to all information around contacts. Okay, so creating contacts, you have a few ways of creating contacts, two ways, specific ways. The first is that you fill required fields. Unique contact ID is generated automatically. The second way is you can create contact from an existing user that exists on Zeit. So that pulls data from the Zeit user profile, and it remains linked and updates dynamically. So the bulk import, which we won't be looking at in too much detail today, is using the bulk template in the settings. We will go over how to do bulk actions in Zeit in next week's session. Okay, so now we can have a look at how one would in practice create contacts and look at those contact settings. So contacts exist on site dashboards essentially, so they don't exist really outside of sites. A contact has to be connected to a site. In the contact summary on the site dashboard, that will show you all of the fields that you saw on contact list view. You can, however, also download an export of the contacts, which will show all of the different data fields of the contact. You can search the contact by ID or name, or you can set any other filter that you would like, because it acts the same way as any data export would act. And you can also edit and delete contacts from that view. So here we're just going to create and view contacts from the site page, just to show you what that looks like in practice. Okay, we'll go back to the project page. This time we won't be going into settings and going into the site part. This might be a little confusing because usually when you go into sites, for example, you can go into the site list and create a site, for example. That's not the same process for contacts, and the reason for that is because contacts exist within the site. So we'll go back to our project, and we can go to the site list either from up here, or we can look at the site list from here. Okay, so over here you have 4 tabs: Home, Map, Tasks, and Contacts. If you haven't done the first step of turning the contacts on, you won't have anything that comes up here under Contacts. But since we've turned that on, we can go into Contacts, and we can look at some of the contacts that exist. So this site has 2 contacts that exist, and these are the 3 mandatory fields to be shown on the contact view. And these are the 3 optional ones that we selected previously. If you remember, we selected gender, organization, and WhatsApp. So let's create contacts. So we have the 2 options as mentioned before. And this is the one that we'll more likely be using in this case. So we'll create contact. Identifier is already auto-generated. And here we can just give it a name. And here we have the contact type. So the contact type will be, let's say, service provider or site management, because that's the options that we provided before. So if it's a service provider, then we have all of this other information, including organization. And these were the two fields that we added before. If we have site management, we'll see that we don't have the field for organization. Okay, so we'll go into service provider, we'll go into NRC, and we'll have some of these different fields. These aren't mandatory, and you can make them mandatory as shown before. You have here status valid until, so you can say that this service provider will only be working until May. We will put the cluster. Again, this is something that we created as only relevant for service providers. Sorry, this was one already made before. So let's just say we have this one, and this is the one we just created together. So we created two custom fields. Let's say in this instance, it would be shelter. And then I believe the activity part has been overwritten by this. We already have an activity that exists over here. But this part over here shows how the cascading options would work. So if I selected wash, you would have the different options related to wash. So we would create contact, and we now have that new contact over here. We didn't input any information on gender or WhatsApp, and that's why those things won't show up. So now to download the full list of the contacts, you can download the contacts over here. And just like any export or data file, it will show up, and it will show all of the different columns for all of the different data fields that we have selected. Oh, good. Cool. Let's move on to the next section now. So map views. In Zeit, we also have a feature which is built in both the project web dashboards and the mobile applications, and these are map features. So the map feature is an automatic feature as long as you've inputted the correct information, the GIS information for the sites and the locations. So this will map spatial information for both sites and regions and form submission locations, as well as all geodata that's linked to forms. Some knowledge of GIS is helpful, and you'll need to have a basic understanding of well-known text format in order to function this, but we can also support with those, and there are also resources out there to help with the maps. So WKT, well-known text format, is essentially just a way of representing geography in strings. We're not going to go into any detail over here, but you can have a number of different forms of this format, and these would be points, line strings, polygons, or multi-polygons. So coordinate order usually goes longitude and latitude, and that's X, Y, and not latitude and longitudes. So, okay, so essentially, if your data isn't already in WKT format, and this will often happen, so you'll get geometry files that exist, you'll download them from humanitarian databases, and they'll be in different formats, GeoJSON, for example, and that means that they won't be readily translated or incorporated into Zeit unless they're converted before. So this can be done through GIS. I'm no expert in GIS, but it is something that can be done, and you can have guidance through it. YouTube and AI tools and ChatGPT can help with that. Obviously, don't use for sensitive geodata. And if you need to put all of your locations, all of your regions in Zeit, and you want them to be mapped, then you can also ask us, and that's part of our operations support, and we'd be able to support you with that. Okay, so map views are essentially in Zeit a pre-configured map which has a customized appearance. The maps can be seen on the dashboard, for example, on the main page on the Zeit platform as one of the tabs. So where you see contacts, you might also see you will also see maps, and you can customize those maps. So as an example, you might have one map which shows where only one type, let's say collective centers, are located in your project, in your operation, whereas another map might only show sites which are active. You can add and customize as many maps as you want to your project. They're quite easy to toggle and fiddle around with, and they can be very useful just to display your work in your project. Some filters that you can use if you have site type, you can filter by site type, you can filter by region, and you can filter by site status. So some visualization styles also exist in the mapping feature on site. You can determine some of these styles. So site colors can change based on different types, regions. The size of the site can change based on progress, mission, that kind of thing. And you can have a number of pre-existing base styles of the map. So now we're just going to go to the map section and create some random custom views, and just to show you what that part of site looks like. Okay, so we go to our project page, and in this top tab, we will have home, map, metrics, reports, and tasks. Obviously, over here, we don't have context because, as said before, context will exist at the site level. So we go into maps, and we have a look at all of these different. So this project that we created just for this training series was set up in a number of different countries. So over here, we have all of the sites which have GPS coordinates that are set up in those different countries. Over here, we can, for example, create a new view. This one would be the default view. So let's create a new view. And now we have the general sites all across, and we have a number of filters over here. So we can look at those filters, and we can, for example, look at site type. So for this project, as we spoke about before, we assigned site type as the site management organization. So if we, for example, just want to we'll remove all of these, which will just show all of them, and then we'll just show acted. So as you can see, some of those sites have now been removed, and we're left with just the acted sites. We could also do that for region, and we could do it for site status. So for example, we could also just show, let's say, for example, just to show how this would work, pending closure. We don't have any that are pending closure. So let's say we just want to look at active sites. So now we have an even more narrowed in, zoomed in version. So this map could be saved by clicking over here. And this would just, we might call this acted sites. So now every time you go into your maps, you'd be able to see this as a map view, and it will automatically update in real time. Let's just say you wanted to do something else as well. So over here, instead of playing with filters, this time we'll just look at the visualizations. So let's say you want to toggle by color. And let's say you want to base that on the site status. So first, you might want to edit what those colors are. So we have active as green, completed as blue, inactive as red. So those look like fairly representative colors, so we'll just leave it as they are. And we'll toggle that on. So now we can see that we have all of the sites coded along with the legend of the different site statuses. So this is something that you essentially best thing here is to just play around with these maps and see what works best for your project if you want to incorporate some of these into your project page. So we'll save this as well, and this will be sites by status. And if you would want to merge some of these as well, you might also add the filter. So let's say you just wanted that the colors, but you only want to keep the inactive sites. And so now you see the only things which remain are the red ones. And you put this as inactive sites. So yeah, just some examples of how you might want to play with these views, and you reset, let's say, or back to home, and the preset one will be this one, and you'll be able to look at some of those different maps which you made. So you have the preset, the basic one, and you can just go to inactive sites just to see those ones in a clear and readily updatable way. Okay, so let's move on to the final part, which is the dashboards. So one of the other features of Zeit is that it will allow you to embed dashboards into your project page. So essentially what this means is that you can embed existing project dashboards. So let's say you've created a dashboard already from some kind of tool, let's say Power BI or Tableau, and or anything that's in an iframe. So that could be videos and media as well. And you have built that dashboard separately. Maybe you've even created it from Zeit Manager. So you have a report or a data set from Zeit Manager, which automatically updates. You have an API, and you've linked that API to your Power BI project. Now you have that in Power BI, but you want to connect it back into your Zeit project page. So you could just add that into your Zeit page so that every time your team and you open up Zeit, you will see the dashboards display as a separate tab, and they can be easily accessible. Some kind of technical reasons of technical information about iframes. So this allows you to show contact from another web address. So that's essentially what's happening here. It appears as a window wherever you place it. So it uses iframe syntax, HTML code, and the reasons why you might want to do this is to centralize resources for your users so they don't have to keep going to different places. So let's imagine that you have a number of different reports on Zeit, data sets on Zeit. Let's say you do a number of activities, and you also do site monitoring across all of your sites. So let's say you will have separate dashboards in lots of different places. Maybe you have just Excel sheets which are connected by APIs. So this can be really helpful because you can put all of those dashboards into one place and back into your project page. So everything is just viewed in the same place. So some of the uses would be videos, pages, dashboards, and other websites, etc. And also good for privacy reasons, because essentially you're putting that contact behind all of the different already managed Zeit users. So how to embed a dashboard practically. So you go into project settings, dashboards, and iframes. You will add a view, and you'd add a tab name. So this is what you want it to be called. You need to add the URL, the address of the contact that you add. And just a small note on this is that you can't embed a dashboard from the classic kind of part of Power BI, for example, where you share the dashboard. You'll need to first publish that dashboard to the web and then take the direct URL. And this is just to keep on the PowerPoint to show you what that would look like on Power BI, for example. So actually, let's just do a quick demonstration here to retrieve a URL from Power BI and then link it to the project dashboard as an iframe. And you'll see all of the different dashboards which you might have worked on. And over here, you will open the dashboard which is relevant. This one I just created in a couple of seconds from the training project that we're doing. So this one, let's say, is called number of activities and referrals by country. But let's say you've done something similar for your project, a much more in-depth dashboard that you want to showcase on your Zeit platform. So over here, you would essentially go into File, Embed Report, and this part of Publish to Web. So you wouldn't just share and take the address. So you'll go into the Publish to Web, and essentially you have over here HTML to paste on a website. So you'll take this and you'll have to cut certain parts of it, and you'll go back into Zeit. You'll go into your project, go into settings and dashboards, iframe. Okay, so right now you don't have any dashboards available. So we'll add one, and the tab name will be, let's say, activities in project. And you'll paste the URL over here. So as you can see, this isn't a valid URL at present. So really, you just need to delete all these parts at the start, up to the point where it begins to look like a URL, the HTTPS. There's also some other parts at the back, so you also get rid of those, and essentially just delete everything that doesn't that's outside of the quotation marks. So once you've done that, you can see that it appears that's a valid URL, and it will save. So you now have an iframe called activities in project. We will go back, and you'll now see that that's popped up in your top tabs. So you now have this dashboard, which is connected and updated from Power BI, and it will always exist in your project page. So thanks very much, everyone. I hope this session has been helpful. Yeah, we'll be in contact after, and we'll see you next week. I believe that the session we'll be running next week will be on the bulk imports and edits of data on site. So thanks again, and see you all very soon.